you're wasting so many people's time that if you were to instead use what we would call low code, no code tools. So think like Microsoft Power Apps, QuickBase. Siemens has a product called Mendix we like. There's these different low code, no code providers that are a middle ground between full stack code writing ground up and some more flowchartish drag and drop stuff. You still have to engineer it. You still have to have full stack developers on staff. You still have to write integrations, but some of them are pre-built or half built. And we liken it to Legos. It's like, well, I can make you a Lego house, or you can ask me to go melt some plastic or build you a plastic house. I'd rather use Legos because I can do it faster.
On this week's show, the point of technology in construction with James Cosman and Kendall Bachman from VeilSun. All right. We're mixing it up. I get to sit down and be outmatched today by two people with me, but this story was too good not to have both of them sit down. So, James, it's awesome to see you virtually again and sit down with you. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am excellent. Excited to talk to you and Kendall. We were rapping pre-show, and Kendall, I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
I am glad to be awake with you. I only slept 2 hours last night, so please pull it out of my brain.
Well, I think we'll get you going. You started going pre-call on this one and got going, so we'll find out maybe why you're sleep deprived at the moment, but we've got you on here. Listen, guys, before we dive into the show, we're on YouTube again, so youtube.com/@the ConTech Crew. Check us out there. Follow us on all the social media so you get the clips, etc. You're going to see us expanding that footprint in all new places, so take a look for us. Are you trying to reach the innovators and decision makers in construction technology? Then look no further than sponsoring the ConTech Crew. That's right, we're taking new advertisers. Email us at advertising@thecontechcrew.com to learn more. All right, so I'm really excited to sit down with these two from VeilSun. Some of you listening in heard the episode with Charlie Dunn, where we talked about a flow state experience in Coffee and Chaos. And Coffee and Chaos came out of a collaboration between me and VeilSun and Charlie and Arisk. So I'm excited to have these guys. But before we dive into all of that, James, explain a little bit about your history and, a little bit about you.
I feel so bad. Your guys' backgrounds are so wonderful and cool, and I've got pictures of my kids back here. And so, yeah, I'll need to do something different in the future. But yeah, so I'm James Cosman. I'm one of the managing founders and VeilSun. We are essentially a construction-focused software development firm, really focused on low code. Been doing this for over a decade. Seen a lot of great things, seen a lot of pretty scary things of how construction companies are managing technology. Work with probably 10 or 15 companies a year, which has given me, I'm really grateful for, a pretty broad view of what's going on and what people are running into. So thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Yeah, well, it's been an awesome partnership. Awesome to get to know you guys. And Kendall, give everybody an introduction, and don't forget that we have a little something in common that I think is pretty crazy. So give a little bit of background on you and why you're here.
What do we have in common? Is it the gray in our beards?
It's not the gray in our beards, although that helps. It might be the fact that this is not your first time on a podcast.
Oh, yeah. I have a entrepreneurship podcast I'm not going to plug because I pulled the plug on that when we had our 5th child, which is why I'm sleep deprived. And it feels like the more children you have, the more days of the week, the chances are someone's going to be sick and keeping you up. So it's like, I don't know, I probably have a 40% success rate of getting a full night's sleep, but that's just life. I ran a full stack software development firm in a previous life. And then I came across VeilSun doing interesting work for bigger enterprises in the construction space. And the low code, no code kind of rapid development approach was really interesting to me because I experienced the pain and torment of full stack engineering from the ground up and everything that goes into that. And it takes so long that by the time you're halfway built on an app, the customer changes their mind, the scope changes, finance is pissed that the costs have tripled, and then you're blamed as the provider. So this is a much preferred way to deliver the same value to bigger companies. So I nerd out on it. I also am carefully watching the changes in AI because I think I think that tool is better at being helpful than people are at being helped. So whoever is open to change.
That's dark.
That's dark and foreboding for the future.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. I like it. I'm going to give you, go back to the all the kids. It's like the Moore's law of getting sick, I guess. The more you
it's
have,
Moore's law.
the more you get sick. It's Moore's law of kids. Feel you there. So thank you for sleep deprivation and being here with us, and appreciate the perspective on the difference in a full stack versus, using low code, no code. And I think, I've been dying to have this conversation for a while, but before we kind of get there, James, we were talking about this during the process. Like, why is any of this important to the industry? You have a unique take on sort of the progression of technology in the construction industry, since you guys are so focused on it.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to share that. It's part of what makes me really excited about construction, and can also, I think, for people in construction, especially young people coming in the industry, can also be like a source of frustration. But what I've seen over the years, in the last, like I said, decade or so, is and this goes for like every industry, and I'm just going to tell you, this isn't like I haven't, if you want a source for this, I'm not going to be able to give it to you. This is just my experience, right? If you want to fact check me. But what I've seen is like, there's really like, in an industry, there's 3 stages that industry goes through, right? And the first stage is like paper and pen and spreadsheets, right? And I watched my dad grow up, run his own business, like build his business. It was a telecom business, not construction. And he had his graphs that he would draw on pieces of paper. And sometimes I ask him, like, what did you even like do all day besides like sit behind a desk and like talk to people, right? But there's still businesses that to some degree run that way, right? Especially if you go down from GCs to subcontractors, right? You still see businesses that are very much run that way, right? And I think the second stage is really where construction, most of the companies that we see are in right now, which is, okay, so we know that we need to transform digitally. Some of the younger people coming into our company are expecting it, but also there's real costs to not doing it, right? Like over budget, over timeline, all the penalties that come around with that, safety issues, right? So what they do is they go out in stage 2 and they're like, okay, well, let's like buy all the software, right? So we see like, and that's why I saw a graph. I wish I could like share it here, right? But I saw this infographic of all the software that's in construction, right? And it was literally like 300 or 400 pieces of software, right? So we'll work with companies, GCs, that have, to run one project, they have 15, 16, 17 pieces of software doing like a little small piece of the process, right? And but they also feel a whole new pain from that because their data's like all over the place, right? Like there's no way to tell, like, okay, the question everybody gets from a project executive or from the owner is like, okay, well, where are we at? And they're like, well, let me get back to you in 5 or 6 days, right? Let me put all that together, right? And they put it together and the data's already 5 or 6 days old. So all the decision making on a construction job site is going off of old information, right? So GCs all the way up through owners are 5-6 days behind what's actually happening, right? And
at best.
At best, yeah, right. Like I can't mention their name, but we work with one of the largest it's an owner, but builders of data centers in the United States, right? And they were running, when we first started working with them, they were running maybe $15 to $20 billion worth of data center construction projects. literally on Google Sheets, right? So that's another place you can end up in, is like, okay, it's not paper, but it's a little bit better than paper, right? And it was insane, like the amount of cost of that. Nobody knew where anything was at, right? So they built these large bloated organizations just to be able to like report on data, right? So to me, stage 3, which is where we as a company and where I think the industry is moving towards, is trying to move it towards, is like, okay, as a GC or an owner, let's focus on like 3 or 4 core pieces of software. Maybe it's like your construction management software. It's like Procore or Autodesk or something like that. And then maybe it's your data lake. And then maybe it's your ERP system for running financials. And then, I don't know, a CRM or something like that, right? And there's technologies now, low code technologies, which is all that we work in with, that can then fill all the gaps between those systems, right? So we're talking really custom apps built in like 10x the amount of time that can be evolved as your business process changes, but you can get the data out of them and put them into all the core systems, so everybody knows real time what's going on. So that's where we've seen other industries move, and that's where I think construction is moving, but it's a long trudge to get there, right?
Yeah, it's taking us a while to get there, and I've said this for a while. Like, I got into this industry because I knew that transformation was coming, and I thought it was going to be easy. Because in a lot of other industries, it was pretty easy. We'd already seen it, but construction's a lot more complex, and those complexities brought and slowed us down. And, there's that natural expansion to point solutions that don't do enough of everything, but they show us that we can do it better. And then we start to consolidate. So, Kendall, I'm interested because you came from sort of the problems with full stack engineering and not getting done, but you're not talking about building a full stack yourself. You're talking about, use the huckleberries like the Procores, the Autodesks, the others out there that have built full stack applications. And then, what's your goal to do with them then?
So I think software in general is just lowering your cost of doing business, right? So, and decreasing time of getting work done. That's why people have systems, and it's why we make software. That's why everyone uses so much software. But the challenge when you as a company want to have software to taste and bespoke to your processes is you have to make a decision, either stand up such a mature IT org that you can keep up with the user expectation that like Apple has created. Like, your grandma has an iPhone in her hand and she doesn't realize that it was like $4 billion of code written to make some of the apps that she takes for granted, right? It feels so simple and people get so spoiled. So it's common for these executives who've been in an industry for 30 years to think I can have an Apple-like experience in whatever feature I want, and I'm just going to go order it like it's a steak. And they don't understand the complexity. So then they get sticker shock. So then they go shopping for B tier. How can I get that either overseas, or maybe somebody else will flat bid it? It becomes a slippery slope because of the lack of understanding what goes into making that steak. Shopping for what you want and eventually settling for something that will slap you in the face later.
I was going to say, because when you said that the whole idea was to lower cost and increase productivity, a bunch of people in the cars out there just slammed on the brakes and said, "That's not my experience. That's not what I'm seeing in my IT budget."
Happens. It's what they want.
It's what they want, but it's not what they get. And
it's why it exists. But then if you don't fully understand what it takes to, I call it engineering, not development, because it's really engineering. It is a layer by layer architecture that is fickle if you build it fickle, and it's strong if you build it well. It's so common for these companies to go try to make a system, contract a system, build an internal IT org, and then 2 years later, they've delivered so little value that is actually commercialized and useful in the field that they compare it to the cost they spent on redoing their work. I changed my mind 6 months in. I got 17 more feature requests. Well, we didn't realize that those 17 features, which are all nice nice things to build, change your architecture. So we needed a different foundation on this because we wanted to build a skyscraper, not a house. There's so much change management that goes in. You're wasting so many people's time that if you were to instead use what we would call low code, no code tools, so think like Microsoft Power Apps, QuickBase, Siemens has a product called Mendix we like. There's these different low code, no code providers that are a middle ground between full stack code writing ground up and some more flowchartish drag and drop stuff. You still have to engineer it. You still have to have full stack developers on staff. You still have to write integrations, but some of them are pre-built or half built. And we liken it to Legos. It's like, well, I can make you a Lego house, or you can ask me to go melt some plastic or build you a plastic house. I'd rather use Legos because I can do it faster.
I've never heard that analogy, but I love it. I love it.
Stretching it.
I'm gonna go make you a mold.
I love it.
I'm gonna pour molten plastic. I can do it.
Hey, but I'll take it further. I'll use extrusion printing, and I will print all those pieces myself, and I will just wait there for days for them to come out correctly.
That's right.
But this is interesting because you're right. This is it's the difference of the thought process, and now everyone knows you've got the Lego analogies. This is why we did some Lego stuff together at Coffee and Chaos. But what I thought was interesting, James, is you guys have this different approach when you're working with customers. Because usually, we're software, right? We're a hammer looking for a nail. You guys have really taken a different approach, and I got to see that at Groundbreak last year. And I know it's something, you plan at most of the events you go to. So talk about the process that you take these companies that come to you through that's different from that hammer and nail experience.
Yeah, definitely. And I use hammer and nail. I use like tailored suit versus non-tailored suit. It's like you go out and you buy something out of the box. It's going to look okay. Like I will not show you my wedding pictures, but I wore a non-tailored suit to my wedding and I've regretted it every day since. Like I ran out of time and I ended up looking like oh my god, what does my wife say? She says I look like a Teletubby, I think is what she told me. and I've regretted it ever since, and it's in memoriam. And that's where you need out of the box system of records for your big systems, right? But what we do is a low code custom software that is like a tailored suit that fits exactly your process, so you don't have to change it. And by adopting those types of low code technologies, it allows us to get to your question, approach how we work with customers differently. Because instead of getting like lost in the technology and is this going to be React base or JavaScript, or are we going to do SQL backend or some sort of Oracle, like we don't have to think about any of that. What we can do is we can talk to the business about the business. So we can talk to a construction manager and be like, what's the problem you're trying to solve here, right? And what's costing you money? What's your biggest headache? Those types of things, right? And we can talk about those things and then design a system with them using business language, talking to them, right? So it's a whole different experience. We call it a blueprint, right? It goes along with construction. So that should make sense to you guys. We're essentially developing a blueprint, but with low code technology coming in, it doesn't have to be perfect. We don't have to spend 6 months defining every little thing. It's like we can show you something real quick and get your feedback on it, iterate on it. That's a technical term, but iterate on it, do a rework on it. So it's not quite as bad as in construction when you have to do a rework. Low code lets us like do reworks pretty easily, right? So that's really what the process, it becomes a business conversation in a series.
I feel like that construction problem, everybody can understand if you get to the third floor of the skyscraper and you had a problem on floor 2 that you need to undo, like that's bad. And that's what traditional code is like. And most companies that stood up an internal team experience that. Most. It's probably all, is my guess, but low code lets us change it to the speed of meetings, basically. if you were to just think about it as like, okay, next Tuesday we're going to show you some progress. If you want to make some changes or you have a new idea on Thursday, that's okay. It's not bad that you didn't know perfectly what you wanted today. So there's this happy medium that's a flow of the real world.
Yeah, and allows too. I think I was having a conversation with somebody recently about this. Like, so many times we're doing something and we're like, we're going to build dashboarding and we're going to use the ERP system. So you're talking to the finance team, and it's like, well, but the finance team doesn't really know what the project team and the field team wants from their
On that
data
dashboard.
or from that dashboard. And you're like, kind of going, maybe we'll get it right. And it's like, or you have the IT team in there and they're like, well, we know where all the data is. We know how to give you the keys to everything, but maybe they want it. I don't know. And it allows you to bring those stakeholders up, but also then bridge the gap to the barrier, the language barrier, and really speak and communicate and talk business and not be relegated into the nerddom, but be up here on the business layer level and change. So Kendall, talk a little bit about how that improves things and the speed of things that you can then do when you have the true stakeholder at the table talking to you.
Yeah. And I think stakeholders plural is more appropriate, because if you're looking at a 2,000 person GC or a 20,000 person GC, like, they have so many complicated systems and processes that are doing billions of dollars of revenue a year. You can't break a process and rebuild it slowly. You'll lose $500 million if you break the wrong thing. So we don't want to cost $500 million just to build some software. But if you get the right stakeholder from the department, you used a finance person example. So let's say within finance, you get a subject matter expert on project finance, or a project controller. They have a very different real world day-to-day expectation of what they need to produce and their boss is requiring from them. If you have to build a single system, a big piece of software that meets everybody in the org, you'll never even talk to that guy by the time you finish that. Nobody will be like, let me go get the project controller and teach him how to give you requirements, first of all. But if you do it this low code, no code way, and you actually have business process conversations, that person gets to feel understood, gets to go, you know what, when we're entering this phase of construction, I need to look ahead 6 months. I don't need to look ahead 18 months, but I have weather impacts depending on the season of year, and I need some software that will automatically look at the last 5 years, snow and rain, and estimate and update real world things, because my subs are lying to me. They don't mean to be lying to me, but they are, because they're not thinking about snow 5 months from now, but it's coming. And I think that guy then gets to have a miniature workflow built in a low code kind of Lego metaphor, put it together. Then we get to go to the 1 degree away. There's a PM who talks with that guy. Well, that PM, to your dashboarding example, has scheduling responsibilities, needs to look at some high level reporting. They need a very different set of workflows. That's a miniature app, I would call it. And those need to talk to each other and integrate. But if you go one bite-sized chunk at a time, it's so much easier to control sanity, not screw up macro systems, and keep building process improvement.
Yeah, I love that, because it's process improvement, right? You broke it down to business logic, process understanding, and then, iterating to get little things faster. There's each of those people has a few things a day that cause a lot of extra work that can really streamline them and keep moving. But the interesting thing is, we kind of started this with the 10 to 15 pieces of software. So James, I want to bring it back to you, is the difference between using technology like this and using those 10 to 15 is, am I creating more in each of those workflows, more data silos, or is it working differently?
Yeah, no, you're reducing data silos, because you don't have each piece of data in some other proprietary piece of software that you then have to figure out how to stitch it all together, right? Like, you can choose a low code platform, you can build, you can fill in all of those gaps, and it's all in one place that you can then share data back and forth between your big systems of record, right? Your Procores, your Autodesk, your ERP, right? So you end up with a much simpler architecture overall from a software standpoint, right? So you're getting like the best of both worlds. You're getting really niche solutions that are specific to your business process, but in one place, right? Built for you. And even those like niche pieces of software, right? Like they're never going to work the way that you guys seem to work. I tell people this early on and they don't really like believe me when you think about it, but something that like the construction companies that really excel and the ones that fall back behind, in my experience, it's their process, honestly, that is what excels them ahead. And when you go out and you purchase a piece of software and you find yourself changing your process to fit that piece of software, you're like by 1,000 paper cuts killing what may be your competitive advantage. Like people want to put these big broad things out there about competitive advantage and like, oh, it's because we have this culture and all of this stuff. But to me, a lot of it comes down to the core of like how you work day in and day out. And you start to find yourself changing that to fit your software and you lose your identity, right?
I haven't heard anybody really put it that way, but I really like that analogy and that look, because it's one of those things. We always say this, right? Like culture eats strategy for breakfast, but culture without strategy is aimless. But ultimately what you're saying here is like your culture is the guiding light of your competitive advantage, but it's actually the accountability and the deliverability and the way that you get it done day in and day out and deliver. And by adapting a different, you're going off center a little bit. And it's important to stay on center for those teams to deliver. And that's a critical component to the transformation and staying and keeping your competitive advantage. Yet, a lot of people then go, well, then I'm never going to adopt technology. It's like, well, that's not feasible either. So
we one time built a piece of software to roll out software for, was that Home Depot or Lowe's? It was like a battle station that was like, we have to do an IT rollout across 1,400 unique stores with individual managers. And the funny thing is, like, every single one of those processes that makes each store be able to have 3,000 people walk through and get scanned was getting bottlenecked, and they needed to have a higher capacity. But if you rolled out if you went and bought off the shelf software and just rolled it out without a plan and without a process for that, you would set back yourself a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of revenue. And instead you can take something like we're doing and go, well, hang on, you need a process for that process. And maybe we build that with some dashboards and workflows and forms. Did you do this? Accountability. Like, it's so funny how we're really just talking about how to be smart business people. We're not talking about technical stuff. Like, we're just selling common sense
in a really well organized package with some superpowers behind it, which is interesting, because we didn't even talk about this before, but you mentioned it. The complex stakeholder problem in the industry has been, I think, what holds us back. And I mean that in the best of ways, because each entity in this industry versus other industries, right, where there's been a convergence and you have a few winners,
more standardization,
right?
Yeah.
So we've got building product manufacturers, you've got trade contractors, you've got general contractors, you have CMs, you have architecture, you have engineering. All these groups come together in a big project to deliver on, we can now say billions of dollars of work, which is amazing that we're at that point. So is there an opportunity to take this beyond the company level and into that project level and maybe dive out and solve some of that redundancy and rework and things that exist out there?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many use cases buried in the complexities that those managers have to live in day to day. And like, a really wonderful one would be resource management and scheduling. If you think about how many human hours are deployed in a given week on a big project, but humans are fickle. We get sick. Our daughters, stay up late and keep us up late. We have snow and we decide to not show up for work. We get fired. If anything changes, which is a constant, change is a constant, then our projects will be delayed. If we can't anticipate delays, we lose money. Sometimes we break contracts. Sometimes we hit penalties. Sometimes the lawyers are now angry. Sometimes the bank is now angry. Sometimes you hurt your future banking finance. It can crumble a big GC, right? So instead, if you were to go to that nuanced, complicated stakeholder who knows what the schedule requirements need to be, you can go, well, how would your perfect schedule work? And what data would be nested in there? And what different views would you want to see in that scheduling? One of the bigger GCs has us completely overhauling custom scheduling for them. And they'll pull in stakeholders 3 tiers away from the guy who originally brought us in, because he's like, they admit, I don't know how forward-looking projections need to be. Why don't you talk to that team? So we become little investigators. We get out our detective eyeglass, and we try to find the relationships between these departments, serve the stakeholders what they need quickly, which again, this is all underscored by quickly. Otherwise we can't actually deliver it cost effective enough or on time. And then we get to keep going with those stakeholders. So some of our customers, I don't know what our stat was, James, but it might be as many as half, have us year over year doing projects they never even dreamed of years ago, but they end up retaining us because they learn their lesson on the first project, that we can use this methodology to keep streamlining stuff. And it's all about the complicated stuff.
Well, it's funny because you're actually benefiting from exactly what you want them to benefit from. You have a vision and a tools to deliver and a process on how you've learned how to do that and a tool set to use. And you go out and you do the work and you deliver, and then you're accountable and they see it. So then, of course, that's the building industry, right? Then I want to come back and build with you again in the future. Then I want to retain you and have you keep finding these holes in my problems, because there is no end to this. Like,
we don't have to find the tools. They
no. I meant
yeah.
not the tools, but there's no end to this. You get to find the opportunities that exist and the holes that exist. And technology is going to continuously change, right? We'll eventually have things we didn't know we needed, and we have them, and then we have to integrate them and get the data from them and report on those things. So we could go on about this forever, but we've been doing some stuff on the road together. I'm excited to see you guys out on the road, and you have some upcoming stuff. So James, let everybody know kind of where they can find you guys in the future. Yeah. Talk a little bit about where you're headed.
Yeah. So if you want to learn a little bit about one of these specific low-code tools we've been talking about, we're going to be at QuickBase Empower March 31st through April 1st in New Orleans. So it's a great location. It's the annual conference for QuickBase. It's back in person finally after COVID. Should be about 1,000 people there. There's going to be really great speakers, and sure, there'll be some technology talk, but it's going to be mostly talking about business problems and how other people in the industry, in the construction industry and in other industries, have solved those problems, right? So it's a great get together. We're sponsoring. We have a booth there. Hopefully you get from this podcast that we're pretty approachable types of people, and we're doing these things called dream sessions, where you can just sit down with one of us or one of our engineers and just talk about a business challenge that you're having, and we can really send you on the right direction of how you might solve that and how you can leverage low code to solve some of these problems. So anybody who happens to be coming, or you're thinking about coming, you don't need to be a QuickBase customer to go. Like, we highly recommend you go to that, because you're going to get a lot more out of it than just here's a cool technology, right? But you'll get some of that too.
Yeah, I mean, we have to get a little bit of that, and I love that because it's kind of like a business therapy and technology therapy session.
Absolutely.
But then also, this industry gets beat up for being behind, and I will tell you that having come from outside of the industry and being close to outside of the industry, still these problems exist everywhere. So we can glean and learn from those other units and sort of commiserate a bit, but you've got that going. You're going to be at Empower March 31st, April 1st in New Orleans. But if you want to watch online, you can as well. So you can sign up and actually stream just some of the keynote stuff. But Kendall, I want to leave on sort of the future. We were talking a little bit about, I'm excited to be out there with you guys, and we're going to be working through workshop stuff, and just a little teaser. You might see VeilSun and some of the flow state stuff, and some of us showing up other places together. But this leads to, we didn't talk about it, and I'm very proud of us that we got to hear. But now talk a little bit about why you think the speed of technology, and now is the time for everybody listening to jump, because I think analysis paralysis is big in construction.
Yeah, I honestly, so AI and machine learning keep evolving at a pace that I think people are hearing about, but maybe because it's like, it reminds me of COVID. We heard about it so much, you just start getting callous to it. Like, it is real, and each of us in our jobs will experience an and suddenly at some point. At some point soon, you're going to have an and suddenly, and you'll either be on the positive side of that or the negative side. And there will be winners and losers, because the rate of change in technology is starting to change itself. People are now writing AI useful tools using AI. Like, so if you just extrapolate that a little bit further, like, it's writing itself with some shepherding from people, and that is good for us. We are all going to get better, faster, better tools, but we are going to be the bottleneck of change. We have to be flexible, hiring people who are flexible, hiring people who are first principles thinkers, ground up, because the innovation rate means that tomorrow's correct decision would have been wrong yesterday, but the tool set changed. And I think the construction industry is not going to be left in the dust. I think it's going to ride this innovation wave too. So it's just something I'm paying attention to. Where is it starting to pop up? It's not all about software. AI is not all about software. It's about business process too. So if you don't get your data in order now, AI won't be that helpful to you in the next 5 years, because it can't do anything with something that doesn't exist. It's fuel. Data is fuel for good software systems, for good artificial intelligence. So if you want useful things to make you have a competitive advantage, you got to have the data organized, get it organized somehow, hire the right people, do an initiative internally if you aren't already. And James and I are big fans of that. Means you need to capture the data. Like, the data exists, but is it being captured? Is there photos out in the field, and where are they stored? How are they stored? Are they indexed somehow? What are your forms? Do you have accountability processes? You might have had good ideas, but are you holding people accountable? So a lot of the tools we end up using aren't complicated data backend stuff. They're actually data capture stuff on the front end, something from your phone. That will be useful with AI.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I want to wrap this bow up and say thanks to both of you for being here, because you've really brought together a bunch of the ideas that we've been talking about here on the show over and over. Is, now is the opportunity. Those Google Sheets that you talked about in the beginning, they are not data, right? We need those into an interconnected system, and if they exist off to the side on 9 of your projects, and then 10 of your projects are using a system, you don't have a complete data set, and you have to use and bring people in like VeilSun and others to come in and plug those holes, connect those systems, and flow that data, so that over the next 3 to 5 years, you can continue to benefit, move forward, and stay relevant as a business, because that speeds. It's now that you have to do that. And the cool thing is, it's a little scary, but we're not at the tipping point quite yet. So you have an opportunity, and the new tool sets that you two are talking about really play well with those Excel and Google Sheets and others to get them digitized into gaining the data. So I want to thank both of you for sitting down. I want to encourage everybody to go check you guys out, and also go meet you on the road while you're out there. James, thank you for sitting down with me today.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having us, Jeff.
Yeah. And Kendall,
Thanks, Jeff.
thank you for sitting down. It was great to have a conversation with both you guys, and to let me to run the mic today.
Yeah. And look forward to some more coffee and chaos in the future.
Yeah. Coffee and chaos in the future. Kendall, we'll have to put you through that soon.
Sounds good. See you soon.
And thank you for tuning in today to geek out for our interview with James Cosman and Kendall Bachman. To read all their news stories, learn more about our guests, and to listen to the show, visit thecontechcrew.com. This is the ConTech Crew signing out. Until next time, enjoy the ride and geek out.